I'm the chief of police for the Quincy, Illinois Police Department.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
More than 23 years.
How long have you been a chief, though?
Almost 7 months. Actually, just over 7 months now.
So what's your favorite thing about being a chief as compared to what you've done before?
Well, I'll tell you, it's radically different from the where we all start. But I really think it's just the community engagement, I guess having the ability to really steer the direction of the department, and getting to do more, I think, for the officers to help them do their jobs better and get more resources. It's a challenging position. I mean, it's much more challenging than I never anticipated it would be, but it's also very rewarding. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand.
I completely agree. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself when it comes to where you started and how you got to where you are?
Well, I started off, I was born and raised right here in Quincy, Illinois. So when I graduated from high school, I attempted to go to college. I always wanted to be a cop, but I knew that I had to be 21 before I could apply. So I had to find something to fill the gap. College was not going to be the route I was going to end up. So I joined the military. And when I got out of the military, I tested as soon as I got home and was lucky enough to get hired within about a year. So I started with the Quincy Police Department in 1999 and worked patrol, street crimes. I moved over to criminal investigations in 2004. Did that for 5 years. Ultimately got promoted to patrol sergeant in 2010. I worked patrol shifts for about 8 years and then was transferred to the administrative services sergeant position here at the Quincy Police Department. About a year and a half later, there was a surprise opening for a deputy chief position. So I put in for that position and was fortunate enough to get selected. So I was promoted to deputy chief in 2019 and was the deputy chief for about 2 years when when the chief at the time announced his retirement and we started going through the chief selection process. So that's a quick rundown. Just in terms of secondary stuff, I've been an instructor for a number of different things: firearms, control and arrest tactics, active shooter tactics. I'm very active in instructing our Citizens Police Academy over the years. I really just enjoy community engagement, speaking with the local civic groups about police work and what we do. And then, where was I going with that? There was one other thing, but anyway. So I think all that kind of stuff has really served me well over my career and has prepared me for my current role. And it really, like I said, it's been challenging. It's been, like they always say, it's kind of like trying to drink from a fire hose once you get selected and into the position. So there's really a lot to try to get used to and to get done. But it's really been, I think, more rewarding than challenging over the last 6 to 7 months.
So what kind of education did you have coming into your role as even deputy chief?
So I had obtained my associate's degree in law enforcement in 2007. So I didn't even have a degree when I started with the department. Once I was able to take some time and start working on that, I completed that in 2007. Really had no, real drive or interest in going back and continuing my education. But once I was promoted to deputy chief and we started kind of looking around and, say, hey, current chief's not going to be here forever. What are we going to do, when he leaves? And, thinking to myself, well, this is something I need to do to prepare myself for, the selection process. Obviously I think education is important. I don't know that it is for everybody, but there are certain positions I think that, require college degrees and things like that. So I decided at that point that I would start going back to school and we'll work on my bachelor's degree. So I enrolled at Western Illinois University in 2020, and I will graduate in May of this year. So yeah, that's kind of the educational rundown.
Well, that's great that you went back to school and you saw that there was a need there and you decided to apply yourself. And congratulations on your upcoming graduation, by the way.
The one thing I do say is it was a lot of work, obviously, and but it's one of the things I should have done sooner. I kind of kick myself now for thinking about all the time that I wasted over the 13 years or so between getting my associate's degree and starting up again. I obviously being in the military, I was able to take advantage of the Illinois Veterans Grant. So school really is costing me nothing except the time and effort it takes to put into it. So it just comes down to laziness and it, so I encourage anyone that has the opportunity to do it sooner rather than later, or do it before you need it, as opposed to in response to a position that may be upcoming that you're going to want to try to be qualified for. So, but no, it really has been tremendously rewarding. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I'm actually a little disappointed it's going to be over in May, but those are kind of mixed feelings because I'll have a little more time on my hands as well. So, but it's been good.
And what's your degree going to be in?
It's going to be in law enforcement justice administration with a minor in human resources.
That's great. That's fantastic. I'm very proud of you that you were able to go back and get it done. And so continuing on now, since you are chief, are you making it a priority education for your officers, or giving some incentive or a little bit of a push to get that drive going?
Well, I think what I've been doing and trying to focus on is individual contacts with officers and encouraging them to move forward. I mean, we do have a salary incentive for associate's degree and bachelor's degree and master's degree. So those incentives are there. We don't really have much of an incentive outside of that, other than the department or the city will pay for textbooks. So if you're working towards a degree, you can submit for reimbursement for your textbooks, which is nice. I mean, even for me, it's a couple hundred to $400 or $500 a semester. But I think overall the salary bump is really what's key. But I think we have a lot of officers that maybe just don't put, they just don't think education is as important, I think, as it can be in helping you really advance your career. And for some folks, I guess that's okay. But for those folks that are really looking to move up, that they're looking to get promoted, they want to move into leadership positions, I really think it's important for them to understand that there's incentives that the city and the department offer that make it worthwhile to go back, on top of just the personal development that it has for people. So I really think that we try to encourage officers, but we also, recognize that it's not necessary for everybody. But I use myself as the example of, hey, 20 years from now, you may be interested in being the chief of police, and maybe you don't right now. So why not prepare yourself for that? So in case it happens, you're ready to go, instead of trying to, retroactively go back and get yourself prepared. So it's very important. And we try to encourage the officers and make sure they're aware of those incentives.
I think that's fantastic. Any big words of advice you would have besides education for officers coming up through the ranks? I think just learn as much as you can. I really think that getting experience in the different, jobs or the different areas of policing is very important. And I think that's one of the things that I was fortunate enough that I was able to work patrol, and then I was able to work on our street crimes unit, which was more of our gang, drug type patrol area. And then criminal investigations, I think, was really one of the most influential parts of my career. I learned so much working criminal investigations for 5 years, and everything that goes along with that. And then, moving over to the patrol supervisor side of the house, it really, there's no, I think, real training that prepares you for life as a sergeant, and going from only having to worry about yourself to having to worry about the 9 or 10 officers on your squad and everything that's going on related to that. So really set yourself up in those leadership positions, whether it be, if there's a tactical team, or whether there's a crisis intervention team, or something that you can get involved in and start to get leadership experience. I really think that's important, because those experiences are going to serve officers later on in their career when they're looking to get promoted or looking to take on more responsibility. Switching gears just a little bit, tell me a little bit about yourself. Do you have any family? What are your hobbies? Things of that nature.
So I'm not a very exciting guy at all. I'm married. My wife is actually a police officer here at the Quincy Police Department. So that was a point of contention during the whole chief selection process. But we've worked it out over the years. She and I have been married for, I better get this right, she might see this. It'd be, I think, 15 years this year in October. So we've been married for 14 years. Don't have any kids. You ask about hobbies, and my hobby for the last 2.5 years has been school. Really, it's taken up that much of my time. I do enjoy playing golf, and I enjoy working out, doing that kind of stuff. But really, I mean, as far as a hobby for me is music. I play drums. I play keyboard. So I'm kind of linked up with a couple of local bands here in the Quincy area. So that's really what I do. That's kind of my release from the job, is getting together, going out, playing gigs with one of my couple of different bands. It's really a good way for me to kind of clear my mind of everything that's going on at work and get back into something that I really enjoyed. Up through growing up and through high school, I was never the big athlete. I was the band geek. Played drums in the drum line in high school and always enjoyed that. So it's something I've carried with me over the years, and that's really my outlet.
I always love doing the art, and music is such a big piece of my life as well. What bands are you in?
Well, one local band's a 3-piece called Prospect Road, and we just came up with that name out of nowhere. But then another band is just a jam band that we kind of started in a local music store with a group of us that would get together about every Friday, every other Friday, and just kind of hang out. And we ended up deciding, well, we sit here every Friday and play music for free. We might as well see if we can book gigs. And somebody said, well, what are we going to name ourselves? And I don't remember exactly how the conversation took place, but at some point, we were talking about tasers, and I said, somebody said, well, do you like the tasers or something like that? And I said, no. I said that, the tasers, they come with too much paperwork. I'd much rather just pepper spray somebody. And somebody at the other end of the table said, that would be a great name for a band. So Pepper Spray is the name of the jam band that we go around, and we don't play terribly often, but we have a good time when we go out. So yeah, those are kind of the two main bands that I participate in.
That's great. So what drew you to the drums though? Because I feel like that's where you really probably shine, right?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny because when I was starting off, it would have been 3rd or 4th grade. I wanted to play saxophone. And the long story short is I don't think my parents could afford to rent a saxophone. And our next door neighbor had drums in his house. So they conned him into basically giving us a snare drum so I could start taking snare drum lessons and play drums in school. I'm grateful they did that. It was kind of like a natural thing for me. But yeah, that's really, I didn't really necessarily have interest in playing drums. It was almost kind of forced upon me. But once it was, then, I was really able to kind of pick it up pretty quickly. So, and then I've just been doing that ever since.
So what's your favorite style of music?
Oh gosh. I think kind of a mix between classic rock and country is kind of, if I'm going to sit down and listen to music, that's probably what it's going to be. But we play a wide variety of all kinds of stuff. That's kind of the cool thing about our jam band is really there's no specific set list. We just literally, even at our gigs, like one of our claims to fame is that we've never actually practiced. We've never sat down and had an actual band practice. So every time we go out and play, somebody will just yell out a song. And if it's something that we have to, all right, well, it's in C and it's, the turn is in E minor. We do that real quick and then we just play it. So it's amazing what we'll come up with, doing that kind of music. But a lot of it, again, is centered around, maybe your not current country per se, but a little older country or Garth Brooks stuff, things like that. And then classic rock is probably a majority of what we do.
Classic rock, and we'll say classic country.
There you go. Yeah.
We'll say classic country, not the newfangled stuff with all the different. We'll just say different stuff going on.
I'm not real into country rap, and I heard a term the other day I was not familiar with, but bro country. And so, not that I don't like Florida Georgia Line or that kind of stuff, but I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, it's really an interesting mix.
So, what's your favorite artist?
Oh my gosh. It really depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about like my favorite artists that like we enjoy playing their music, I really think, I think Blake Shelton's probably my favorite. he and I's voices are kind of similar. So when we do Blake Shelton songs, I mean, I can sing Blake Shelton songs, and we also have a good time with that. As far as drumming goes, I mean, I think my favorite artist group is Rush, and Neil Peart, I mean, I think is probably the best drummer ever. And he passed away not too long ago. So I think as an actual group, when it comes to the drummer side of me, Rush is where it's at. But Blake Shelton, I also appreciate his songwriting style and the stories he's able to tell. But I mean, again, I'll listen to just about anything. So, but those are the two that just come to mind.
Were those your go-to when you were in the car, in the squad car?
I'll tell you what. Well, unfortunately I don't spend a lot of time in the squad car anymore, unless I'm driving over for the Siley meeting or something like that. But to be quite honest with you, podcasts are really what are my go-to when I'm in the squad car. Just trying to catch up on things that are going on in the world is really I don't listen. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't listen to a whole lot of music in the car. I just kind of throw the podcast on the phone and hook it up to the Bluetooth and off we go.
Well, that makes sense because so much of your regular life is made up with music, with the bands and everything else. So that actually makes a lot of sense. What's your favorite podcast?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I enjoy, I don't want to offend anybody, but, your Ben Shapiro's, your Mark Levin's, kind of the talk radio podcasts that are out there. But I really enjoy like the storyteller podcasts, whether it's true crimes type stuff. Wondery's got a couple of history podcasts that I enjoy listening to, just learning more about like the American Revolution, but the getting down deep into the stories of the folks that were involved in the different phases of that point in history. I just find tremendously fascinating.
Switching gears now, favorite movie?
Not a big movie watcher. I honestly, I have a hard time sitting still for 2 hours to do anything. Ghostbusters, I think, is still my favorite movie of all time. But I also enjoy Westerns, and I'm not going back Westerns, but like your Young Guns, Wyatt Earp, different types of Westerns like that. I really enjoy that out West cowboy kind of field of movies. Unforgiven, different stuff like that. But Ghostbusters still, as a matter of fact, I was thumbing through the thing yesterday and I saw the Ghostbusters pop up on one of whatever the apps was. And I almost clicked on it just to watch it again. And I stopped myself because I knew as soon as it started, I wouldn't be able to stop. So, but yeah, I still think, I don't know why that one just always resonated with me, but I always just got the biggest kick out of Bill Murray. I thought he was so funny in that movie. And it really just over the years, it's always stuck with me.
That's one of my husband's favorite movies as well. He loves Ghostbusters. And now my son, who's 4 years old, we actually found a children's book for Ghostbusters that he could read that was appropriate for his age. And that's the one he usually goes to every night. It's either that or the Goonies children's book. So those are the things that he loves the most.
That's funny.
I get the Ghostbusters love. I do. I think my husband may have even cried at the Ghostbusters Afterlife whenever that came out. So. I could feel you on that one. So we're going to wrap this up a little bit by just kind of going actually a little bit back to the beginning when it comes to when you started your career. Did you have any leaders or mentors that you admired?
I did. We had a particular lieutenant. Well, I guess when I started, he was a sergeant. But Jason Simmons was somebody that worked on the police department that I was able to work with early on. And I think, I'm not sure what exactly drew me to him initially. I think it had to do with the fact that I was a former active duty military guy. He was a former active duty Army guy. But he just reminded me a lot of the good leadership that I picked up in the Marine Corps. He just kind of was almost that all put together into one person. And he was very fair, but he was firm. He held people accountable, but he was also a good coach. And he was willing to sit down and listen to ideas and everything like that. He was ultimately in 2004, he was the reason he was transferred to the investigative section as the investigative commander as a lieutenant. And he was a big reason why I wanted to be a part of that unit. And so he and I got to work together for 5 years when I was a detective. And again, just being able to watch him, to learn from him, to be able to get advice from him, and everything that I think, as we go through life, we have good leaders and we have bad leaders. And, I think we learn just as much from both. But he was just a really good leader that I felt was somebody that I could emulate as I made my way in my career as well. And so I always appreciated all of his guidance and advice over the years.
So now that you've become a chief, I'm sure you're mentoring some people now, or
I think right now our two deputy chiefs are really they're both new to their positions, so it's we're all kind of trying to get our legs under us at this point. But I think it really comes down to leadership and their leadership styles, and I think that they work well with my leadership style and with what our department needs right now. So just trying to encourage those guys and teach them what I know about the positions that they're in, but also making sure that, hey, but you're the guy that's in the position. You need to make it your own position, and do what you think needs to be done. So right now we kind of limited, at least for me, I kind of limited to that, and until we get our things up and moving. We actually just learned about a new mentorship program for one of our groups that does youth activities, after school and stuff like that. So as soon as I can try to get things calmed down a little bit, I'm interested in participating and volunteering for that program as well, because I think it's important for us to get out into the community, sit down and talk to kids, especially kids that maybe are coming from, a troubled home or something like that, and just get them perspective from somewhere other than just their individual neighborhoods. So yeah, I think it's important for both internal in a police department and external for police officers to be involved in those types of programs, to just engage with youth.
That kind of almost answers my question, because I was going to ask you about the best advice that you could give to your officers, but it sounds like that would be one of your big things, to give back to the community. Am I wrong?
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and I think that why I think that is so important is not only does it help the community, but I think for officers' individual mental health, at least for me over the years, engaging with the community, getting out and working with folks outside of a call for service is key. We find ourselves too often getting very jaded that the world is against us and that everybody's a bad guy. And, no matter what I do, I'm going to get yelled at, spit on, called names, whatever it may be. So it's important to understand that there are so many people, and I speak for Quincy, but I know this is a national trend as well. There's so many folks that support law enforcement that you have to go out and you have to engage with them, and you have to find them, and you have to talk to them, and you have to let them kind of set you straight in terms of what's actually going on in the world. And not everybody is a crook, and not everybody's out to scam everybody. Not everybody hates the police. So when you get out and start talking to these folks and you realize that they really do support us and they really are interested in our well-being and how we do our jobs, because I think for a lot of people, police work is fascinating. For us, it's our day-to-day routine, but for people that aren't involved in it, they want to know more about it. So that those types of positive engagements, I really think, are what kind of keep me centered in my job and not get too far off to the side that, well, I don't like doing this because everybody is against us. That's absolutely not the case, and that's the best way to convince yourself that there are indeed people out there that really care about us.
That's great. That's great advice. We're going to circle back around also to the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. How long have you been a member?
Oh, goodness. I think I've been a member probably since 2020. I'd have to go back and look. But I know when I became deputy chief that I started my membership with the organization. And I've been, I just can't say enough about, even in my limited, use of the literature and all the information, it really is a great organization that if you're in a position where, you need the executive advice, the information, the feedback. It's a great organization that provides those types of things. I even joke now, having been a part of the organization for, about 3 years, people ask me, certain questions about, whether it's the Safety Act or the pretrial fairness portion of that act or the assault weapons ban or anything like that. People will say, well, what are your thoughts? And I'll say, well, the Illinois Chiefs will support this, or the Illinois Chiefs are neutral on this. And because I really think it is an organization that brings together law enforcement executives from all across the state and provides that leadership and that guidance that we all need. And I talk to our mayor from time to time, and he says, well, what are we going to do about that? And I said, I don't know. I'm waiting for the Illinois Chiefs to send out some literature so we know where we should be going. It really is a valuable resource for anybody that is in a position where they're going to need that kind of information. And again, not to belabor the issue, but it was one of those deals as well. As I was going through the website, I came across the police chief certification process. And as a deputy chief, knowing that I didn't have a bachelor's degree at the time, I said to myself, well, I probably ought to look into this certification, because if I want to have a leg up on somebody, throughout the process, this would probably be a good way to do it. So learned, a lot about the process early on and thought it would be a good fit. So ultimately made my way through that process and was certified through the ILACP. So, there's just so many different things that you can get involved with through ILACP, and they're such a resource for those of us in executive positions. And I've always appreciated all their work.
How was the certification process for you?
Lengthy. It was challenging. I'm not gonna, obviously preparing for the test, and I had my own kind of circumstances that were going on at the time. When I started kind of preparing myself for the written test, I was also preparing for our lieutenant's test here at the police department. So I kind of had both of those going on at the same time. But ultimately, I found it very challenging, but I also found it very rewarding once, as I would complete the various steps from submitting the application and getting approved to move forward to taking, preparing for and taking the test, and then going through the oral interview process. I really, I always joke with our officers when we talk about promotional testing, and they all complain about, well, I've got to read these books now and try to learn this stuff for the test. And I say to them, I said, the funny thing though is that as you're reading those books, you'll actually learn stuff. You'll actually pick things up along the way. You feel like you're trying to prepare and you want to do well on a test to get promoted. Ultimately, you'll actually pick up information and you'll become a better leader, or at least a more informed leader, as you're doing those kind of things. So don't look at it as I got to study for a test. Look at it as an opportunity to learn. And that's what the chief certification process did for me, is it allowed me to prepare myself more for the role. And I appreciated that.
Any other information you'd like the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police members to know about you, or to know for future reference?
I don't think so. We're in a kind of unique position over here in Quincy. We always joke that we're just completely isolated from the rest of the state in terms of, we're a 70, was supposed to be a 73 sworn officer department. And so one of the bigger agencies within 110, 120 miles. So it's just a very different way of operating, compared to like the Chicago suburbs, when one city meets up with another city and people are able to share resources. So I guess the one thing I'll say is don't forget that Quincy's over here on the river by Missouri. But that's why I think it's important for, to be part of associations like this, because the networking and the ability to glean information and reach out to folks when you have questions is key. Hi, we're still over here in Quincy. We're still doing our thing. If anybody needs anything, we're more than happy to help. Just appreciate all the networking that I've been able to do over the last 7 months with several of the chiefs over in central Illinois and then moving up north. So it's really been a great experience.